All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining our webinar today. My name is Belle. I'm the head of demand generation at Binalyze, and I will be your host today. In today's section, we will be sharing some insights from our latest research report, the State of Cybersecurity Investigation 2026, where we surveyed 200 CISOs to understand how organizations are actually investigating and responding to cyber incidents today. One of the key highlights is that while most security programs are actually focused on prevention and detection, the real challenge often begins after an incident is detected, understanding what actually happened, how far it spread, and how to prevent it from happening again. So we'll go over some of the key findings today from the report and discuss what they mean for security teams like yours looking to strengthen your investigation readiness. And before we get started, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. First of all, this section is being recorded, and we will be sharing a copy with you after today's section. Secondly, we welcome and encourage your participation. So if you have any questions or would like to share anything with us, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A or chat box. We'll try our best to answer all of your questions at the end of the presentation. And lastly, if you would like to connect with our team or talk to our experts, please feel free to email us at contact@binalyze.com. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker today, Lee, who is our chief investigator at Binalyze. He is a very seasoned investigator with deep experience in incident response and cyber investigations. He also leads the Binalyze investigation research and works very closely with security team to improve how they investigate and understand cyber incidents. And today, Lee will share his perspective on the report findings, as well as what the security teams can do for investigating faster and reach more conclusive answer during an incident happened. So with that, Lee, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Belle. I guess from my perspective, today we're going to talk about a few insights, 4 insights specifically. And that comes from a combination of some research that we did with our customers, the market at large, as well as some qualitative feedback and experience that we have from some of our own engagements and work with our own customers. But the bottom line on this is that this presentation should be a conversation. I would rather dig into individual questions the audience has and focus on those rather than just get through all of the content. I do think what we have here today is important. Would love to get some feedback on that. So again, drop questions at any time, and we'll answer those as soon as we get to a good stopping point. So I think one thing that comes to mind, especially with the recent conflict in the Gulf, are the return of black swan breaches. So these black swan attacks that risk putting companies out of business are an on-again, off-again thing in cyber. Seems sort of like whack-a-mole every 2 or 3 years. We know that the vast majority of security leaders believe or understand that they're going to suffer a cyber attack of some type, whether that's a business email compromise, an account takeover, or something relatively minor, or a data destruction attack. And surprisingly, greater than half of the respondents basically don't know what to do if that happens, and they don't really know how to prepare. A little bit more tangible and day-to-day or incident by incident metrics or findings. Really, the key point of this insight from my perspective when I'm servicing customers or victims is it takes more than a day just to understand what to do or what the state of the incident. Many times when I get called in or our team gets called in, we're an escalation point for other responders, and we'll be 2 or 3 days in, and we still don't have an understanding of how to understand scope or what the nature of the attack might be. And the challenge with that is sometimes the CIOs or the internal IT teams or the security teams, they don't understand their own infrastructure because it's vast. That's not a dig or I'm not trying to cast anybody in a negative light. It's just a reality. When you have a large footprint, IT footprint, the infrastructure can be very difficult to understand. And if that takes you more than a day, the thing that we've learned by the recent Stryker attack is, if it takes more than a day, it can be catastrophic. It can really risk putting your business, out of business. And then you've got to worry about, if you're like me anyway, you've got to worry about paychecks and putting food on the table for those employees. And The impact's much more tangible, it seems like, this year, especially after this Iran conflict, than it was last year or in years past. I think the second thing that we've really identified this year, and something that we've been investing in, I've certainly been on the speaker circuit around emergency management and incident management systems, is the most CISOs know that there's a lack of skill, but they don't necessarily, I think as a cybersecurity community, we don't necessarily know where the skill gaps are. We tend to throw bodies at it. So the larger organizations out there will have a team of 15 to 20. Some of them are much larger than that, 40, 50 people. Some of them are much smaller than that, 1 or 2 people. And the skill gaps exist in a couple places. Certainly technically, malware analysis, large scale data or threat hunting that's on the borderline of data science. Those types of things, those sorts of technical skills are things that we are augmenting with AI as a community. I think we're seeing some successes in that area. But the place where it really seems to be breaking down as I respond to incidents or talk with customers and respondents is the actual emergency management framework. Now, these emergency management frameworks are very effective in traditional incidents, like say there's a your stock price drops, or in a more tangible sense, like there's a like a structure fire, you need to call the fire department. We have great frameworks for that. They haven't yet really pervaded. They're not that common in cybersecurity yet. So normally what we see in our own emergency management framework, and if anybody has gone through any of the ICS training or done anything with FEMA, you'll see this is sort of like an incident management org chart. We'll see that most of the time we focus on this part. Certainly when we do our tabletop exercises, it's not as common to include the recovery operations folks or the public relations people. And as we start to look at incidents as a workflow, we'll see something that looks similar to like a NIST workflow, or something similar to our investigation or analysis workflows. And we know the industry has gotten pretty good at this. Like we're good at generating alerts. We're pretty good at verifying those, but there's a really big human element on that. We're trying to solve that as an industry with AI. We're okay at investigations. If I can shamelessly plug Binalyze, I think we're doing some really interesting work here, some really thought-leading and great innovation, speeding up investigations and getting more accurate answers. But the place with the industry that there's just a gap is the actual coordination. So containment and recovery is hard. Investigations are hard. All of these things are fairly disjointed. And I think, I feel fairly certain that if we apply standard emergency management frameworks that you might get from a FEMA, the National Incident Management System, Incident Command System, these types of things, from the time an incident starts off to the time it's resolved, that time is just going to get shorter and shorter. And really right now, we've created automations and AI and things along those lines. We've gotten really good as skilled operators. There's just not enough of us to make the technical pieces fast. Right now, the thing that we're seeing slowing down is the human components. How do I communicate? How do I determine which other human I need to communicate to? What is the nature of that communication, and which decisions need to be made? This is the part that AI is going to struggle with, and this is where we're investing heavily. We're working on the FEMA documentation and best practices there. We're working very closely with TEAX, who's the Texas A&M engineering extension. They focus on incident management training, things along those lines. We're really keen to help the industry solve this problem. And with that, I'd like to ask a poll. So not only have we talked to the respondents and some of our own customers, I'd like to talk to the audience as well. So what is your perspective on what is slowing your challenge down? And I apologize, I don't know what the poll looks like from your perspective. I can only see it from mine. So if you could take just a moment, 30 seconds, a minute to answer that poll question, and we'll see if we get some results back. Bill, could you share those results with us when they're in?
Yes, certainly. I think it's still going. Just give it maybe 10 more seconds for our audience to go. I'm seeing right now leading is lack of visibility, and then followed by too many tools and fragmented workflow. Is that what you guess as well, Lee?
Yeah, I think so. There's probably, I can't even talk. It's probably going to be a little bit different per industry, but definitely visibility is a huge problem that we've seen time and time again. And it's either too many tools or too many manual steps. If you have a lot of funding, it's too many tools. If you don't have enough funding, it's too many manual steps. But definitely agree with that.
All right.
Awesome.
Sounds legit. Back to you.
So take the dollar figures with a grain of salt. Of course, we're going to have selection bias with that type of thing. Anytime you ask respondents, it's based on the small segment of respondents that you get data back from. But for sure, delays in response, and I think there's a few of these, cause real material impact. So I think one of the another thing that we're seeing in industry is a lot of folks will have external incident response retainers. This has been common for 20 years. I used to do a lot of incident response retainers with SLAs. I think those are becoming less common for a couple of reasons. Number one, we have more responders in industry. Some of those tier one high quality responders are now at MSSPs, which have faster response times generally than consultants. Sorry, consultants. I come from that background. This is just what I'm seeing. I'm reporting what I'm seeing, or what we are seeing as an organization. Second is I think I said it, there's more internal responders, so less of a need for external support. Also, we see when these campaigns happen, sometimes the SLAs for the response retainers just don't happen. Like, we can't respond. There's just not enough humans to respond within that SLA timeframe. So we're delayed 2, 3, 4 days. Or if you don't have a retainer, there's 1, 2, 3 days of legalese back and forth before we can actually get boots on the ground, so to say, start collecting data. And the challenge with that is, again, ransomware attacks, they go off on the first day. These data destruction attacks, news reports are indicating 200,000 endpoints wiped. How do you recover from that? Like, we've been chewing on that problem internally on what a recovery process might look like, and it doesn't look like a cybersecurity investigation. It looks like you're rebuilding a building that burned down. It's much more akin to a tangible, like emergency management style problem rather than a cybersecurity problem. And I think we're really going to start to see a transition from CISOs as cybersecurity and more like cyber resilience or business resilience. So maybe more of a combination or a melding of risk officers and security officers. Certainly in the traditional emergency management communities, cyber is becoming more of that conversation. And I'm also seeing cyber professionals in government, municipality, state, federal, reach out to emergency managers during incidents as well. So not only consolidation on the product side, but we're really starting to see consolidation on the manpower and process side also. And I'd like to highlight one more time, when these data destruction attacks happen, they're getting closer and closer to having life and safety impacts. So this medical manufacturer, I don't know what the state is of their situation, but if they can't produce those, manufacture those medical devices, then downstream from that is a life and safety risk at some point. Same thing, 50,000 employees who might not be able to feed their families. How does the medical industry absorb those 50,000 employees? Like, what does that actually look like? Is that like an immediate forced unemployment event type of thing? Like, the downstream effects of these types of attacks are quite significant if it does in fact put Stryker's ability to manufacture devices or even stay in business at risk. The last insight that we have is, it's the same thing we've talked about for 20 years. There's just not enough people. And I think we're starting to understand it's like, this is a very nuanced problem that a lot of people have mulled over and opined on for decades at this point. But do you solve this with new hires, straight out of college? Is this something where you proceduralize it until the point you need less people? Can AI solve some of these problems? I don't think we've really put our finger on, as the industry, exactly what the problem set is yet. We know we don't have enough skilled folks, but what skills do they actually need? And I think we're finally starting to turn the corner on that. For one, we know it's very clear in the market that cybersecurity incident response is no longer like the tier 1 Delta Force Green Beret type of thing. It's now starting to actually become, to use a buzzword, democratized. And we're starting to see people come out of the cyber version of Fire Academy or the Police Academy and start to be useful on day one rather than taking 2 or 3 years to ramp up and then be useful and help solve security problems in an organization. So that's happening. We're also starting to see a melding of the minds again on that emergency management versus cyber piece. So that's starting to happen. But still, we still just don't have enough responders. And frankly, this is a place where the MSSPs around the world can take advantage of that skill deficit or that headcount deficit and service a larger number of customers by centralizing where those experts are. So imagine the same thing as a fire department or a police department. Not every organization out there is going to have a dedicated firefighting team. Some do. That's the thing. Disney World and Florida, they have their own fire department. But not everybody does. So you end up with centralized assets and resources with that specialty. I think we're starting to see a similar move in cybersecurity, where it's no longer the consultants that are leading the charge, or not as often. It's more the MSSPs that are taking this over because they have more manpower. They can do the 24/7 monitoring, things along those lines. Let's see. I got a question over here from Matthew. How is the skill gap being addressed with a challenge for new hires to get an investigative mindset curiosity? That's a great question. I think what happens, great question. Let's go back to the firefighting example. Not every firefighter is an arson investigator. And right now, I don't think we have, as an interesting, this is a hypothesis. What's that disclaimer? My thoughts are not the thoughts of my employer. I mean, they kind of are on this topic. But not every firefighter is an arson investigator. We definitely need those. We need investigation leads. But at the end of the day, when we face a cyber intrusion, there are 4 questions that we need to answer. Number 1, does the attacker still have access to my environment? If they do, that is the same thing as going to a structure fire and seeing flames showing. It's a higher severity situation. Second question is which systems are impacted, which rooms are on fire, which buildings are on fire. Third question is how did the attacker get in? How did the fire start? And the last question is going to be which data is at risk and who do I need to notify? So if we start to break this into digital forensics and incident response and separately, and I know there's some other folks, influencers in industry that feel the same way. I actually think it goes incident response and then digital forensics. Let's put the fire out first, and then let's figure out how the fire got started. 2 sides of the same coin. I just think you start with the other side of the coin face up first. So in that case, if we can break this down into more discrete things, separate from like a tier 1, I have a high volume of information. Tier 2, I have slightly less volume. Tier 3, now I have something to figure out. What if we start with tier 1 or level 1's job is to figure out if the attacker is still in the environment. If they are, then we escalate. Level 2's job is to figure out which systems are impacted and if this warrants moving up. I think some folks in industry are doing that. Some folks in industry are solving volume issues versus investigative issues. But I think that's how we start to solve the manpower problem is not everybody's going to have an investigative mindset. Not every cop's an investigator. Not every firefighter is an investigator. Let's treat it like a crisis first. That's an easier thing to do procedurally. And then we can start focusing on attacker decisions and investigating the thinking adversary on the other side a little bit later after we've achieved containment or after we at least understand what the scope is. So with that, let's ask poll question number 2. How confident are you that your team can determine root cause? So great follow-up on the back of that question, Matthew.
Yeah, please feel free to, select your answer. We just want to do a reality check after, Lee talking about all the insights and key findings, and now how confident you feel. Give it like 10 more seconds. All right. I think we are seeing somewhat confident in our audience.
Yeah, I tend to think, is my mic still working? I might have hit my hardware. I think I'm good. I tend to feel the same way. Every time I go into an investigation, I feel somewhat confident that I'll be able to identify root cause. Some of this is because of evidence erosion. Some of this is anti-forensics techniques. Most of the time that I get involved, it's going to be EDR has been evaded or some weird thing has happened. It's just some edge case. But most of the time we can't find, most of the time we don't get access to those. We'll go to Q&A in a second. But most of the time we don't get access to that root cause because we're simply not collecting the direct evidence. It normally does exist at some point, not always. And certainly, like, you need a combination of telemetry data and direct forensic artifacts in order to answer that question. So I wish I had the core 4 questions on a slide here and I could present easily. But when you're in those first two, that firefighting phase, those first 2 questions, is the attacker still here, and which systems are affected, you can get some okay answers with telemetry data. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult if there are some anti-forensics techniques or they've evaded one technology or another. And as you start to get into the more forensics or arson investigation style questions, which are how did the attacker get in, that might be buried, and which data is at risk, you really need that direct evidence, and the telemetry data becomes less useful. And certainly when you're trying to answer the deep questions of which individual records are at risk or which individual persons do I need to notify as a result of this breach, like, we're really going to be looking at databases and direct evidence at that point versus anything telemetry. So, you know, it's sort of the same old adage, like security is an onion, you need multiple layers. But we're getting to a point of maturity in the industry where we know where the lines of demarcation are. Is the attacker still here? Gosh, I hope your existing security tooling can tell you that. We'll help you answer that much deeper to see if there's any other latent living off the land type activity. And as you start getting further down, it really does become, data collection becomes a hard problem, or evidence collection becomes a hard problem. Analysis of that evidence at scale becomes a hard problem. One of the questions I ask is when folks are I guess when I'm evaluating investigation capability or incident response capability, what is your definition of a large case? And sometimes people will tell me 10 assets. Sometimes people will tell me 100 assets. The folks that have been doing this big time for a while, they'll tell me tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of assets. The largest engagement I've been involved in, and there's been a couple of them, have been multi-million asset engagements, where that's the initial potential scope because that's all we have to go off of. And whittling that down is an art. It's not a science. I think for most of the engagements out there that are in the hundreds to thousands, I think we can boil that down to a science. Yeah, I think this is where we're at as an industry. We need to keep working on it. Awesome. Any questions from the crowd?
Yeah, we're open for Q&A. If you have any questions or anything you'd like to share, please feel free to pump them in the Q&A box. I saw that there's a reply from Matthew as well. Yep.
I like Daniel. Most cases have up to 1 hour of firewall logs. I would say I hardly ever ask for firewall logs anymore. It's a procedural question. I don't expect to get anything. It's not because firewalls are a bad technology. It's because retention is just not great. See, next question.
Yeah. And Lee, I think there is something also related to, the skill set shortage that you talk about. So there's a question asked, which part of an investigation absolutely need a senior DFIR expert today, and which part could be safely handled by the well-trained first responder or SOC analyst in your experience?
Good question. I think there's a couple pieces. So it depends on how far down the line. One, it depends on notification. So are you catching the phishing attachment on the first or second endpoints, or are you catching it before anything's been clicked on? So if that's the case and you have that evidence, or there's no evidence of interaction with a malicious document, I'm just picking this example, then you probably don't need a senior DFIR person. Maybe you want to have one overlook it or oversee just to check. It's always good to have another analyst double check you. But in those situations, it's not so bad. However, as you start to see lateral movement, basically the line of demarcation is lateral movement. If you see something successfully executed and is starting to migrate from one system to another, not one document landing in 5 inboxes, but it going from an inbox to a computer to a server. You definitely need to involve a senior DFIR person at that point. And that would be the point you want to start evaluating, notifying your incident response retainers and things like that as well. You don't know how fast it's going to go. And again, ransomware attacks go from 0 to 100 in 8 hours. Most of the time, actually, when you see a ransomware attack, it's over before the start of the business day. Same thing with these data destruction attacks. If you don't catch it quick, it's game over.
Right. Okay. Great response. Just looking at the other one. So I think it's more like related to the prevention stuff. So if your primary EDR, email, and logging platforms were suddenly taken offline, so what is your plan B for investigation first, and then second, decision making?
Gotcha. So what we're dealing with in that situation is the attacker. What comes to mind for me is the attacker may now have dominant control of my environment if multiple security apparatus are offline. So you go back to the drawing board and you start using these whiteboards behind you. You figure out what service accounts you may have access to, or what other administrative accounts you may have access to try to regain dominant control of your environment. Some of the things that I've seen in those situations are the attacker will be living in the blue team's browser, or like they've basically stolen a browser session somehow. In some cases, I haven't seen them uninstall en masse EDR. I have seen them do it selectively. Normally what I'll see is the attacker adds exclusions to the EDR. They basically add exclusion rules to whatever security tool it is. And that way their malware or their techniques are not picked up. So one of the first things I do, again, I'm an escalation point, is I'll just ask that question: have you looked at your exclusions yet? And many times, I'd say many times, a handful of times, we found the attacker had added things there, or somebody had. So that's one thing. But again, those tools are if those are out of bounds, if those things have been taken offline, you've got to look at like SCCM if you're a Windows environment, Jamf if you're a Mac or a combined environment. What sort of, you can get creative with PS exec and local admin credentials. Whatever you can do to start installing your own packages. We're collecting evidence from the fleet. Yeah, if you don't have access, it's a high severity incident, to say the least.
Okay. All right. Up to the next one. What questions, in your experience, usually do executives most often ask during an incident happen that investigator cannot quickly answer or with confidence? What's the most common questions?
It depends on how far you're down the investigation, but it boils down to the core 4 questions. Is the attacker still here? You get that one on day 1 and probably every other day. 2, which systems are affected, because they want to know how much they have to fix or replace. You'll get that from the board and from the IT people. 3rd is everybody wants to know how they got in. Most of it, or sometimes you can figure that out, sometimes you can't. I'm not going to put percentage values on that answer. And then after things are contained, the question you get most often that's hardest to answer, or it can take time to build strong answers as an investigator for each one of those questions. I think the one that takes the most time right now is which data is at risk and who do I have to notify?
Okay. Sounds very legit.
Yeah.
We got another one from Brian, I think. How do we get MSPs to transition from troubleshooting mode to incident response, IR mode? Many times we get on site to find the in-house IT or the MSP has continued to troubleshoot long after determining this to be a cybersecurity incident. So over to you, Lee. What do you think?
Great question. In times of crisis, people fall back on their training and experience. So in those situations, if you see people that are doing what they're comfortable with or what you're familiar with, it's called strengths-based leadership. So you need an incident manager or an incident commander in there that knows what to do and how to use those resources. Troubleshooting is going to be required. So there's going to be multiple veins. Let's see. I'll go back here. This is one of those things we're not good at as an industry yet. So those people that are troubleshooting are doing the recovery operations. You want them to continue to do that. However, that's important, but it's not as urgent right now. And you'll see that the folks in the security operations are doing the urgent and the important work because we need to put that fire out right now. I think this is where that incident manager comes into play. You have to have somebody with enough authority to bring in new resources, warehouse people that are being destructive. I mean, I've kicked police chiefs. Sorry, I've kicked police chiefs out of incident briefings and things like that before because they just weren't being useful. And my father's a police chief, so yeah, that one hit home pretty hard. But that's what you got to do. You know, the outcome for this is for the victim and for yourself as the victim organization, or you know, for your customers, the users, whomever that might be, and that's what you got to focus on. You know, put people, strengths-based leadership, put people in the roles where they're going to excel, and if you've got detractors, you got to remove them from the room.
Great. Okay, some more questions actually coming in. How would you prioritize or break down tasks when leadership team is looking for recovery or restoration, and I'll say at the same time? So how should we prioritize that?
Great question. So that incident manager or that incident commander is going to want to have a small number of people to talk with. So public relations is normally handled by marketing or legal, for example. So you'll have to make the best choice that you can for that sort of thing. Talking specifically with our RCA or recovery ops, you know, recovery ops is going to be that senior IT person, whoever that is. Security ops, I go back and forth. It's organization by organization. Normally, I want an incident responder in that seat. I don't want somebody from a SOC in that seat. For a couple of reasons. One, incident responders do incident management more regularly, in my opinion. Second, that the person that's in that security operations seat, I don't want to pull them away from their screens. Basically, they know what normal looks like. They normally know what bad looks like in their own environment. So I don't want them having to brief me as an incident manager. I want somebody who can pop in and pop out instead. And that's generally what you got to do. Is leadership's going to ask those questions. The incident manager's job is to set expectations with leadership, formulate briefings. I mean, there's some pretty good templates out there for what a leadership briefing looks like from an incident manager, but you still got to set expectations and modify that based off of the personalities and emotions you have in the room. It's very much a people problem. AI is not going to solve this issue.
We hope that it answered your questions. Upcoming next, Lee, and then is asking, how often are you handling the same incident types over and over, getting to the same root cause, repeating recommendations over and over, and then how do you actually move the needle forward in the lesson learned that will prevent them to, you know, getting into the same cycle again?
For me personally, I rarely handle the same type of incident over and over again, but I used to do that all the time. This is normally a leadership or a communication issue, and it's not to say that, I don't know, the CEO or the board's at fault. There's a two-way communication at that SOC manager or that security leader level and the senior leadership level or the board level, whatever it may be. You have to articulate that risk in a way that is meaningful to the business. Something like, you know, if your organization values SOC 2, we are seeing the same incident over and over again. We're not taking action on this. By default, we're not going to be able to pass our SOC 2 next year, or something along these lines, which is a thing, by the way. So that type of thing, it's without having more details on that situation, it's going to boil down to both the senior leadership needs to want to ask questions and interrogate the situation, and the security leadership needs to be able to articulate that risk in a way that impacts the business or is meaningful to the business.
All right.
I just want to look at that second part of that question. How do you actually move the needle forward in lessons learned that will prevent us from getting into a cycle of clients not doing what they need? This sounds like it might be coming from an MSSP perspective. That's a good question. That's a hard problem to solve. There's no incentive. So basically what happens for an MSSP is your customer hires you, and then in their head, they just transfer all of that risk to you, when it's more like AWS's shared responsibility model. You can use our stuff, but if you misconfigure it or you abuse it, that's on you. That's an expectation setting. thing that needs to occur from the go-to-market team during the sales process. That's an expectation that needs to be set with that customer. Even when you set those expectations, you're still going to get customers that are like that. They just don't think about it. Much like it's going to be similar to, law enforcement trying to enforce traffic. People speed all the time, and we know it's bad. But most of the time, most of the folks that speed like that have never had to respond to a fatal accident, right? So us on the cybersecurity side, we see the same thing over and over again, same phishing over and over again. And we've had to respond to these things so many times that we know what the potential impact could be. It's the same thing for that traffic officer. They've worked those bad accidents before. They're writing all of these tickets, but the populace, the common driver out there just is unaware. So there's this education gap or experience gap that's just always going to exist. And we can mitigate. We can't stop it. All we can do is mitigate it. And there's some things that we can do. I think the corollary in law enforcement is called high visibility enforcement. So you just turn on all the blue lights, you pull a bunch of people over, and people slow down for a week or a month or something like that. I would say it's probably the same thing in some sort of similar formula in MSSP and for us service providers, where we've got to do something that's highly visible to the right decision makers or the right users at the organization. Without the relationship's different, so you got to do that without upsetting anybody. That's a tough problem.
Yeah, I think Matthew also echoed on your points that we have to admit there were faults and then have the maturity to do that.
Exactly.
Right. I think we have answered all of the questions, actually. If there is no more question, I would like to thank you, Lee, today for, presenting all of the, wonderful insights, sharing his perspective with us. And then also thank you everyone for joining again. We hope you find this discussion and this section is meaningful and helpful to you. So as a quick follow-up, we will be sharing the recording after today's sections, and then including a copy of the report itself. And then also a link for you to, if you would like to kickstart the trial of Binalyze AI and explore the investigation capability that we discussed today. And if you would like to stay in touch with us or our team, so please connect with us on our social media channels. There will be LinkedIn and X. And then so we do regularly share research, investigation, insight, and upcoming events on there. And then thank you again for spending your time with us today. We hope you have a great day, and we probably will see you in a few weeks' time. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Pete. Take care, guys.
Bye.